Well, hey everybody, Hudson Henry here in my Portland, Oregon studio. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how easily you can create a custom profile for your particular printer, for your particular ink on a custom paper. You know, here I'm going to do Hahnemuhle's really beautifully textured torch-on fine art matte paper. It's got this really beautiful texture to the paper, and you know you can download a profile for my HP 9900, but it's a lot more accurate to create your own custom profile, and not every paper manufacturer out there builds profiles for every printer out there. So this really gives you the ability to just dial in a profile and software proof using that profile in software like OM1's PhotoRaw 2020 that we're going to use here to get a really accurate look of what that image is going to look coming out of your printer on that particular paper with your ink. And we're going to use X-Rite's i1 Photo Pro 3 Plus spectrophotometer, and it's kind of a big imposing package, but everything in it to create a custom target and scan that target to create your own custom profile is nicely packaged in this big black case here. You know, you've got underneath this section, which is nicely kind of laid out, there's padded sections for holding on to everything you need to use this spectrophotometer for monitor calibration, printer calibration, projector calibration. We're going to use it for printer calibration. It also holds this nice little calibration tool for it. It has a perfect white target and acts as a nice place to rest it on your desk. And it's got its big USB 3 cable, real high quality cable, all fits in here, along with some cool things that come with the Pro 3 that weren't in the earlier versions. There's a polarizer, which is going to let you use this to do really reflective surfaces like metal paper, or you know, even if you're working with kind of a metal substrate or something that's just really, really reflective. The polarizer will help that reflectivity not throw the measurement off as you're doing a custom profile. And the Pro 3 also has a wider aperture than prior spectrophotometers that they put out. So it'll work really well with a high texture like a canvas or like this really textured paper that we're working with from Hahnemuhle. And then on the other side of the case, you know, this Velcro's shut so it won't move. We've got the ruler that the spectrophotometer slides along, as well as a little magnetized table with guides that are adjustable, and we'll just use that guy. I'm going to go ahead, close this case up, slide it out of our way, and we'll go ahead and just get ready. We need to print a target. So the first thing you're going to do is plug in your measuring device, put it on that calibrating stand, fire up i1 Profiler by X-Rite, and you can see it recognizes that measuring device is plugged in. You can use it to calibrate your display or your projector or a scanner, but we're going to go into its printer profiling section. And the first thing you do when you warm this thing up is you're going to calibrate it using this little stand. It takes about 30-40 seconds. Once this thing fires up, it's going to come up with a test chart. And actually, the first thing you do is set what printer you're using. We are using the Epson Stylus Pro 9900. The paper size that I have in this torch-on is 13 by 19. Where is that? Let's see. 13 by 19 right there. And you can choose whether you want a small, medium, or large set in the test charts. That just determines how many little squares there are. It can set up multiple pages. I usually find medium works just fine. And then you can go ahead and print this test chart on the printer that you're making the profile for. I've already done that, but the way that you'll do it, I mean, the settings are going to be slightly different depending on your operating system, depending on the brand of printer that you're using. But the settings that you want to make sure that you disable are any of the automatic print color management that comes with your printer's driver. You want to make sure that all the color management's turned off. It's just zero color management at all. It's printing just straight up that target as it comes through. You'll have to go and figure out what settings when you load the paper in are recommended by the paper's manufacturer for that particular brand of printer. In my case, I went to Epson's website, it said Epson 9900, and it told me, you know, which sort of paper choice to choose that's the closest to the thickness and texture of this paper so that the printer will work with it correctly. And then you carry that through in your print driver settings. So you'll print this test sheet, and like I said, this table is magnetic. It has these metal guides that just stick to it, and you're going to set your test chart on the paper and pin it with those magnetic guides. And set the top one down so it's on top of the print, and it's got it pinned with enough room to, you'll sort of get the hang of it as you do it. It's not hard at all. You set it in there, and you make sure that these little metal magnets on the sides are right flush to the edge of the table, and then you can set your ruler down between those two. Oop, turn it around. You want the start to be over on the left side, and you just set it down right there so that the front see-through plastic edge of this lines up right under the edge of the first squares in the test target. And you're going to go ahead, now that you've printed it, select next. You can see you're scanning the first row here. You start from left to right, and you just pick up your measuring device. You're going to set it down. I'm actually going to move the cord around myself here. You set it down, it just sets right into that slider on the ruler. You got the ruler set where it's right on the edge there, so that positions that in the right spot. And you start off to the left of your test target on the paper, but to the left of where the colored patches start. And you press this button, and it'll glow green for just a second and make an audible sound on your computer. And you just, without pressing down, you just gently slide across. When you get to the other side, release, and it'll blink twice green. That lets you know. Also get an audible. I'm going to shut that off and silence my my audio on my computer because we don't need that. But the double blink of green lets you know that it accurately got that row. If it blinks red, something went wrong. So you click it, get a green light, and just gently slide it across. No rocking. You don't have to move that slow. It'll do a good job of it. You let off, you get a double green flash. It's pretty forgiving, I find. The more you do it, you'll find you can get sliding right across there relatively quickly, and it does a fine job. So I'm not going to go through and slide every single row of this, but you can see it's checking off the ones that are done. Once you go through the whole process, you'll click next. It'll give you kind of a test chart. It'll look slightly different based on doing the entire thing. And you can choose if you have a specific color temperature that the print's going to be displayed under. Say you were doing this for a museum or a gallery where the lighting's really controlled. You know, if you're doing it for a client, you don't know where they're going to hang it. You just do standard illuminance. I tend to like D65. That's a 6500 Kelvin kind of calibration. Same that I calibrate my monitor to. And you click next again. And it's not active right now because I haven't totally finished the process. It would give me the ability to save the profile, and you can rename it up here. You want to rename it something that's going to be useful to you. So I'm going to call it Torchon _1 or 01 hyphen 14 hyphen 20 for the date. And then I just click save. I've chosen that I wanted it installed at the system level. I'm using my Windows computer. I also use Mac computers. That would put it into the operating system's color management with all the other profiles in the computer, and it's automatically going to install it in your editing software. So it'll be in ON1's Photo Raw. Now you'd have to restart Photo Raw to have it look through those folders of all the profiles that are available and register it. But it'll put it in there. And you can also add folders that you'd like to just keep it stored in. I put it in my Dropbox folder so that I have it activated in case I was going to use my laptop to run a print. Or another computer, or something happened to this computer. I don't lose my profiles. I like to put it in Dropbox just so that all my custom made profiles are in there too. So essentially, that's all you need to do to get a custom profile for your particular printer with the paper that you want to work with. Now, let's talk about how you'd use that custom profile. you know, it's this, you've got to have your monitor calibrated. This is the third in a series of videos I've done with my friends at On1 and X-Rite. And the first video we talked about how critical it is to get your monitor calibrated. I mean, otherwise software proofing for printing or even just editing, how do you know that the colors you're editing are actually accurate? I mean, if you don't know that this thing's calibrated and that red is red and that the tones you're working with are the tones that you're working with, it's extremely difficult. So, you know, On1 has really nice soft proofing ability. We can go in, oh, we have to go into edit. Right now I'm in browse, which is more of the file management portion. I'm gonna go into edit, which is where you go to raw, process, and finish edit your images. And I wanna go into view, profiles, and check which profile I have activated. I work with a lot of different papers and different printers, but you can see I've got this Torchon 11420 profile that we created right here. And I'm making sure that that's the active soft proofing profile. For rendering intent, I usually start with perceptual rendering intent. That just says I'd rather prioritize keeping the tones in my image accurate than color. I can tweak color after the fact. You know, the other potential rendering intent is relative, which tends to favor color over tone. Maybe one's a better starting point than another. You can always go in and look at both of them. I'm going to enable the soft proofing. And everything's going to get dull because we're soft proofing a matte paper. And matte papers don't have a very dark black point. Their contrast is really limited. It's not like a Barita paper or a pearl paper or one of those semi-gloss papers that has a real broad dynamic range. You get real dark darks, real bright brights. Fine art paper is a little bit different when you're working with matte inks and matte papers. So you got to kind of just adjust it a little bit. So what I tend to do is I'll create a version of this file. I'm going to open up my thumbnail view here. And I've already created a version and done a little bit of tweaking and editing. So here's the version that I created for printing. And you can see I added a little bit of contrast. I pulled back on the highlights just a touch. I boosted the shadows a little bit. Pulled the whites and the blacks just a touch. And then, you know, I might add a little structure in too. Why not? And then I boosted the saturation a little bit, pulled the color temperature back because that paper's a little warm and it was starting to get way too warm down here, and where that late afternoon light is hitting that side of the alley or the street. And so I went in and I also just went in a local adjustment, and I toned down this guy's bright orange vest just a little bit for the print because I felt like that stood out and distracted a little bit. So all I did was in Photo Raw, you can do these local adjustments, and I pulled saturation way down and took a masking brush and just went in there and just finally brushed the saturation out of that guy's really orange vest. And there you go. You know, I'm ready to go ahead and print the file. I go ahead, click print. I chose the Torchon profile that we've created. I've chosen perceptual rendering intent. That's how we soft proofed it. I went into sharpening. I did not choose a glossy because we're working with a matte. I chose just regular sharpening, a print sharpening, or if it had matte settings, I would use matte. I'm going to print it 12 by 18 on 13 by 19. Give myself a nice little border there. And I'm using the Epson Stylus Pro 9900. I'm going to set that printer up too to say what paper I'm using and make sure all the settings have color management turned off. If I go into setup, the really most important thing to me in here is I can go in and I've got a Torchon setting here, but the big thing to me is under mode. If it were automatic and it said Epson standard sRGB color, we're going to be in trouble because that's going to override all the soft proofing we just did. I want to go into custom and say off, no color adjustments. Now, your printer's driver may be completely different, and if you're working in Mac, it's quite different than PC. It's all frustrating that there's no standard I can tell you, but the big thing is turn off that automatic color calibration. You do not want it. So I can say okay. Okay, I go ahead, hit print, and I'm gonna, through the magic of video editing, show you what the print looks like. It's right here. And if I compare, let's get out of the print engine and go back to where we are looking at it soft proofing on the screen. It's pretty darn nice. You know, when I was when I first bought my first really good printer, I won't name names, but it was a printer brand that was way out ahead of its time. This is like 10 years ago, maybe more. And it had a built-in spectrophotometer, and you could put any paper that you wanted into it, and it would bring that paper. It would print a test target, not dissimilar to this, not as advanced. You know, the inks weren't quite as good a set, but it would print test targets and then let it dry and then pull it back into itself, scan it, and build a profile for soft proofing like this. And I loved it. But that manufacturer sort of abandoned that printer design, never kept developing it. It didn't move into the modern age. And you know, this printer that I have I absolutely adore. The only caveat is I didn't have an easy way to work with custom papers and build my own profiles and get real super accurate with my soft proofing. And now with this, I am able to jump into PhotoRaw 2020, turn on soft proofing, activate my own custom profile for any paper that I want that I created with my printer and the ink in my printer. And that's just a fine level of control for your print purposes. Now, again, you want to make sure that your monitor is really well calibrated and up to date. If you're going to go through all this work, make sure that your monitor is displaying accurate color. But it's really a joy to be able to take a look at what you see on the screen, edit it to what you want, and have that roll out of your printer every time. All right, hope that helped or dramatized how fun this can be and stirs some of you to think about delving into it, dabbling with it, or even deciding maybe to take a print workshop with me and my good friend Rick LePage at one point. I'm easy to contact and ask questions about this stuff, and that's what I do. That's what I love to do, is help people with their photography. You can find me at hi@hudsonhenry.com is my email, hudsonhenry.com is my website. Tons of stuff there. I'm easy to reach. You can find me on YouTube too. So thanks so much. And yeah, it's a blast. Color management's important, but it's also really, really rewarding.